Hi guys, this is Dave Dejewski, the president of the Damascus Soccer Club. With me today, I've got Jim Caldwell, the executive vice president of Unequal Technologies. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that's very important, not just this year, but for the protection of our kids going forward, and that is concussive injuries. I'd like to introduce Jim Caldwell. Jim, how you doing? You're calling me from where now?
I'm in the Philadelphia area, outside Philadelphia in Glen Mills. And Dave, it's great to meet you by Skype, and glad to spend some time with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I know you're an expert at this, or about as close to an expert at this kind of thing as we've ever heard. Jim, just for my viewership, Jim has been supporting this project of how do we reduce or mitigate concussive injuries since 2011. He went to work with a good friend of his, Rob Vito, who started this company called Unequal Technologies back in 2008. Rob Vito is an inventor. He's a smart guy. He's figured out how can we take special technologies and put them in a device around your head to help protect kids from getting concussive injuries. Yeah, look at that. There's one.
There's an example of one, exactly.
I was tempted, Jim. Go ahead.
It's an interesting topic when you think about it, because in the end, when you think about the sport of soccer, whether you're a coach, a parent, or a player, you just want to enjoy yourself. You know, you're not really standing around thinking about and worrying about, gee, I'm going to get injured.
Yeah.
And so it's incumbent upon thought leaders, club leaders, people such as yourself, Dave, to make sure that everyone who is a stakeholder in the game, from everybody participating, you really kind of have to understand what's going on and what the risks are in soccer. We all hear about football, and boy, football. We see the concussion on the field on the Friday, the Saturdays, and the Sundays, and the Mondays, and the Thursdays. And it's we can sense that was a concussion. That was a horrible hit. But let's face it, in soccer, so often, a player falls to the ground and, they just fell. But if you go in and check it out in slow motion, that person fell and the head whiplashed against the ground, and good chance they had some kind of a concussive injury, whether it was subconcussive, below the level at which we all freak out and go, oh my gosh, that person's injured, pull him out.
Right.
He's fine, he can continue, he seems to be okay. And then you've got the horrific head-to-head, a head-to-post.
Yeah, you hear all the parents, they all say, ow, and then it happens, right?
Right, yeah. Right. So stuff happens out on the pitch. And our company, among other things in the world of soccer, is focused on seeing if we can reduce the risk, mitigate the possibility of there being a serious head injury.
And I would point out that this path that led us to you has been sort of organic. So we started off with a prompt by U.S. Soccer, which mandated all soccer clubs across America to pay closer attention to this concussive injury issue, because concussive injuries are accounting for the number one cause of soccer is the number one cause of concussive injuries in girls around the age of 14 years of age. And we've noticed that it's not just that one big dramatic hit that's causing problems with kids. It's a lot of these little micro hits. So if they're not heading the ball correctly, or if they fall, or they have an impact with another player, they go down on the ground and they fall back and they hit their head on the grass. All of these little injuries, studies have now shown, are adding up over time, and they're causing problems for our kids.
Yeah, statistically, we always think about heading the ball as being the danger in soccer. And kids, U.S. Soccer comes out and says below the age of 12, right, that we really don't want kids to be heading the ball at that age. And there's a transition point where they can start and things like that. Well, meanwhile, heading the ball accounts for only 30% of the concussions that are registered in the world of soccer. Now think about that. Only 30%. So about a third. Well, I'm sorry. So another 2/3 of the risk is associated with everything we just talked about: elbows, knees, head to ground, head to post, and head to head. And when you're battling for the ball, you kind of want to go for it because I think I'm supposed to, but I'm a little nervous, and you go for it, and bang, there it happens. And you bring up one other point, this dynamic of subconcussive hits. There's a fellow by the name of Dr. Julian Bales who sits on he's the chairman of the Pop Warner Medical Advisory Board. He's written several papers on this whole thing of multiple subconcussive hits that in their aggregate can be just as harmful as that one big concussive hit. So look, let's face it, Dave, this is not a conversation about fear, but it really is about just being aware and doing what you can to reduce the risk. And thus, Unequal is dedicated to making sure we bring ballistics grade technology out of the military, frankly. One day someone says, well, you're in bulletproof vests. You reduce the energy associated with a bullet strike. Have you thought about sports? It's like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I would say for the parents and coaches who have not been, first of all, I would say every Damascus Soccer Club coach has been required to go through and take either a heads-up concussion course, which is offered through the Center for Disease Control, or one of our other alternatives, like some of our licensing programs. NFHS does a great job with concussions. U.S. Youth Soccer gets into concussions, but everybody has to take a concussion, not only concussion course, but a concussion refresher course on an annual basis, because a lot of this particular type of injury is out of sight, out of mind. If we don't see blood, we don't see a bruise, we don't see something externally on the body, we forget that inside there's a very sensitive organ which tears easily, which bruises easily, and gets banged around inside this brain bucket we call the skull. So I have a little
and you make up an interesting point to what you just said there, is that much, if not most, of the focus when you're talking the world of concussions is detection, treatment, return to play,
right,
isn't it? Think about that. It's all about, let's detect. Let's put a sensor on the heads. Let's figure out what the protocol should be. How long do we keep the student out? What's the baseline test we do so we can understand, do they have a concussion?
Yeah.
All those types of new, better approaches over the last few years, as we've all become more aware, we're more educated. As you said, there's mandatory teaching that has to take place from the folks that are in a position of authority. But and companies like us, we say, well, let's talk prevention. But of course, we have to be the first to say nothing prevents, nothing eliminates concussions. But well, wait a second. If I wore a massive bubble around my head, I'll bet you I'd have a little bit better protection than having nothing. So we can all see, well, logically, yeah, some form of protection is better than nothing. And that's really kind of like almost the starting point. Whatever the headgear is that any person chooses, you have to figure that something generally should be better than nothing. And of course, we say, well, wait a second, let's take ballistics grade technology, layer it into a headband that looks terrific and kids will actually wear, and have some substantive protection so that you can go play the sport you love with less risk. So that's really the goal here.
So I found a definition that comes right out of our Heads Up concussion course for what is a concussion. I'm going to just read this off because there's a couple of nuances in here that we don't always think about. A concussion is a type of traumatic brain injury, or called TBI. You've heard a lot of this in the news from military folks who get concussive blasts from bombs and stuff. They're taking traumatic brain injuries. It's caused by a bump, a blow, or a jolt to the head, or a hit to the body that causes the head and the brain to move quickly back and forth. So, as you know, Jim, and some of our viewers know, my history is as a combat medic. So I was in the service, and I was trained to take care of specifically combat-related injuries, and we frequently talked about the brain being sitting basically in a fluid inside of the cavity here, and whenever any type of blow or hit or explosive power hits, the brain tends to shift back and forth. Same thing happens with a car accident. And as that brain shifts forward, it can impact the frontal lobe of the brain, and it causes a bruise here, and then it can whiplash back and hit the backside, and you can have a bruise in the back. And so you can get bruised a number of different ways just by jolting your body around. And this is, by the way, folks, for any youth sport. This is not just for soccer. It's just that we have some mandates from youth soccer to pay close attention to this. But it goes on to say this fast movement can cause the brain to bounce around, twist inside the skull, creating chemical changes in the brain, sometimes also stretching and damaging brain cells. There is a great video, and I've posted this video just a little while ago, of a young girl. She's 15 years old, and she testified in front of Congress talking about her experience with concussive brain injury while she was playing soccer. She took the hit. She wound up hospitalized. She was having learning disabilities. She was starting to slow down her ability to absorb what was going on in school. And nobody picked up on it because they didn't make the connection back to those incidents that she was having on the soccer field. And over time, they did uncover this. And then this young girl wound up going back to a rehab, but it was a very long, extensive process, and she was able to get back all of her faculties. But then she went on the I don't know what you call it. She took it on as a personal mission to make sure that everybody in the country knows the importance of this. She didn't want it to happen to anybody else. And that's why we came to you guys, Jim. You're not the only company out there that provides protective gear, but I think you've done a really good job at least explaining to me how your protective gear or protective gear in general works to distribute the shock impact around the head instead of having it go in. Can you talk a little bit about your technology and how that works?
Yeah, I can. But first, I want to point out that you bring up an interesting point. When people have these experiences and their careers are stopped, Brianna Scurry, two-time Olympian and a World Cup champion, two-time Olympic gold medalist and World Cup champion. Her career was stopped dead cold by a knee to the head. Horrible concussion. Took her 3 years, in fact, same number, for them to finally figure out and make a discovery of some kind of an interesting nerve problem rippled off of that concussive moment. And she was in misery for 3 years. So it just goes to show that indeed, concussions, okay, I can be back playing soccer in a week or 2 or 3, or in 1 or 2 days. Okay, true. But bad things do happen with concussions. It's just something we have to be aware of, and thus the need for protection. Yeah, how the material works, it's interesting. There's a reason that Kevlar is in bulletproof vests, okay?
That's true.
And all of our products have Kevlar or what's called an aramid fabric, an aramid fiber. There are others that are just as good, if not better, than Kevlar. So that concept of taking Kevlar, but then coating it on either side by varying thicknesses of elastomer. So we sandwich aramid fabric between different types of foams, different types of elastomers, so that when we create an additional barrier that Kevlar by itself doesn't have. It's interesting. You think about rebar, when you drop it in cement, what happens to the cement? Well, frankly, it's much stronger. You can take a big fat, 50-pound swinging thing into the wall, and the wall will not fall down. Take the rebar out, wall goes right down. So it's not dissimilar in our situation where we coat Kevlar, and a result when impact comes to here, X amount of it simply can't get through, and it's dissipated laterally and scattered. That energy is scattered, and frankly, because we have multiple layers, that energy is confused as it goes through the layers, and so less gets to the head. And that's basically the principle in play here.
So what I think of when you explain this? I think of, I'm a Boy Scout leader, and we teach rescue and stuff like this, and you get somebody out on thin ice. You want to bring a ladder with you. You want to bring some long boards with you because you want to spread out your weight across the ice in a much broader way. The ice itself can then sustain a lot more weight than if we try to walk on our, these little points of our feet out to rescue somebody. And it seems to me that the same thing happens with this device that you sent me a copy of this. And by the way, how is this supposed to go on? Is this piece supposed to go down?
That's what we call our Halo 2. And the Velcro is in the back of your head. Right. The logo and the curvature of the thing goes ergonomically over the ears. And your logo is on the left. Correct.
So I'm wearing it correctly now.
You are. You're a genius at how you put that on.
I don't know. I played around with it a little bit before we got on this call because I was, so if I take an impact here now, what it's doing is it's spreading the energy of that impact out around the headband instead of transferring it to my head. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, some of it. Not all of it, but some of it. And enough to make a difference. There's the typical ASTM. Don't ask me what ASTM stands for, Association of Standards and Testing Materials, I think it is. They have certain tests that in fact, ASTM has a certain headgear test, right? So what they do is they say 80 Gs. Anything below 80 Gs, whether it's the side, the front, the back, if you can register less G force than 80 Gs in the ambient temperature, cold and hot and all this stuff, then you have protective gear that meets a certain headgear standard for soccer. Now, our 10 millimeter, I'm not sure if you're wearing the 10 millimeter there.
This is the 10, yeah.
Okay, so that one has passed all aspects of the ASTM test, for instance, and does stand up. But in the end, you're talking about something. You ask yourself. There you go. You ask yourself, why? What are we talking about acceleration for? Well, think about an airbag in a car. So the car hits a wall and there's a dead stop, and the airbag deploys in front of you, and your body goes into that. Well, what happens? Your body is moving, let's say, at 30 miles an hour, and you come to a dead stop. Well, what happens? The airbag sits there and decelerates your body into the airbag. How should I say? In a period of time that's different than if you hit a brick wall and you're done, stop, finished, right? So that deceleration is a factor. Well, why does ASTM talk about G-force? Well, if you can reduce the amount of G's associated with a head impact, if there's less deceleration in essence, then you're helping to mitigate the risks associated with that impact. Yeah. So we reduce acceleration. And Virginia Tech, in a landmark study that was published in the National Institutes of Health, funded by them, by the way, they talk about helmets, and they're coming out with more studies on different types of helmets and headgear. Anything that manages energy better, anything that deals with acceleration better, is going to predict a lower risk of concussions. That's what we're all about.
So, again, I'm going to back up just a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit about things that we all need to know about concussions. These are signs that are observed by parents or coaches and symptoms reported by children and teens. So, signs observed by parents and coaches. I want to tell you, everybody that's watching this, if you're a coach and you're on the sidelines, you're paying attention to a lot of things. And so we're watching. All of our players are trying to figure out practice ideas for the following week. Where are we weak? Where are we strong? What's the score? What phase of play are we in? There's a lot of stuff going on inside a coach's mind. And U.S. Youth Soccer has realized that a coach may not be the best person to be evaluating concussive injuries on the field when it happens. We all take a timeout. Everybody takes a knee. We focus on that for just a minute, which is really important to do. But at the end of the day, it's very important if your son or daughter experiences something that we might suspect is a concussive injury that they be checked out by a professional. So U.S. Youth Soccer is saying, take the kid off the field. Don't play them again. If we even suspect that there might be something going on, take them to a doctor, have them checked out before we bring them back. Things that we might notice, and parents, if you're watching this, you're going to pick up on this maybe faster than anybody. If your son or daughter appears dazed or stunned, if they forget an instruction or they're confused about an assignment or a position, if they're unsure of the game or the score or an opponent, these are things that, a kid comes to me and says, what game are we playing, or what team are we playing against? I'm thinking, was this related back to that injury that he took or that fall that he took, and I might pull that kid out of a game and sit him on the bench if I start to suspect that it may have been concussive. Concussive kids will move clumsily. They'll answer questions more slowly. They may lose consciousness. They may not. They may show mood, behavior, or personality changes. They may not be able to recall events prior to or after the hit or the fall. Now, what they normally report, this is from the kids' perspective now, and they're reporting to parents when they get back in the car, or they're reporting to coaches when they come back to the bench. They might report a headache or pressure in the head. They might have nausea, or they might vomit. They might report that they're having balance problems or feeling dizzy or having double or blurry vision. They could be bothered by light or noise. They might feel sluggish, hazy, foggy, groggy. There might be confusion, concentration, memory problems, or just not feeling right or feeling down. If you as a parent or you as a coach see any of these signs, it's important now to start thinking, how might this be related to what's happened on that field, concussive kind of things. And by the way, concussion injuries don't have to happen on the soccer field. They can happen before a soccer game, and that person comes to you expressing these kinds of signs or symptoms before you put them out on the play. You may not have seen what happened, but earlier that day they may have fallen or head butted with their sibling or something. And so we all need to be hyper aware of this.
And quite often, let's face it, concussions can happen when the head wasn't even close to being hit. I mean, they do happen where you get a concussion, you fall in a weird way, the head does something, your head snaps, whatever, but you didn't hit anything.
Right.
So it's incredibly non-specific sometimes, and you're right. You've got to just pay attention after every game. You should just check with your boy or girl. How you feeling? Everything good? Any collisions out there? Any falls that you may think you're okay, but you're not? Just ask them. Take 15 seconds. Ask them the question. Engage with them and just determine, no, I'm fine. I feel great. Everything's great. Okay, let me know if you sense it. Especially if you saw them in fact take some kind of a fall or hit or whatever. Especially even if they passed the muster and the AT on the side, or you as the coach, you watched a coach talk with them and they seem fine. Ask them later. Check again. It can't hurt. No skin off your teeth to just always be informed. What's my child thinking or saying or doing that sends me a notice that maybe there's something wrong here?
Right. So we talked about what is a concussion. We talked about how to recognize it. We talked a little bit about what we're going to do in our behavior as a club relative to concussive injuries, to include the training and pulling the kids off and encouraging kids to be seen by providers. Now we're at the discussion point, which is mitigation. How do we prevent this kind of stuff from happening at all? And I want to give some shout out to Rob Engels, Coach Rob Engels, who did the research for our club. Initially, he went out and made contact with a number of companies to include Unequal. He started the conversation with Jim, brought Jim into our fold here a little bit to help us get a little smarter about what kind of devices we might have available to us for our kids to help keep them from getting concussions. Jim, can you tell us about these things, the different ranges of them? Put us in the
Sure. Put
us in the box.
The basic, you happen to put on what we call the Halo 2. We have the Halo 3, which has no Velcro. It's just a single closed loop device that if anybody wants to look at this, I defy you to tell me, gee, that doesn't look just like a headband, which is the method to our madness. Let's face it. It's important, Brianna Scurry, when she discovered us at the National Soccer Show in 2015 of January, she's walking the floor, ran into us, there we were, had a conversation. Next thing you know, she's asking a lot of detailed drill down type questions. And she said, you know what I love about you the most? Okay, I'm buying that your technology does something different than apparently the rest of the folks out there. I love the fact that it's something kids will wear because, it's got to pass the mirror test. And come on, we're all vain on some level, kids especially. What does someone think about me? I don't want to stand out. Gee, I've had 2 concussions. You're going to make me wear that? Oh, must I? But then when they realize, wait a second, this just looks like a headband. Look at it. You put this on, boom, and there you are. Now, you can go out and play the game of soccer. You can enjoy yourself, and over a period of time, you forget you have this on.
Yeah.
This has this nice, snug, stretchy fit and is designed to just look terrific, but it has our coated Kevlar, our coated aramid fabric, layered inside there. This is about 6 millimeters thick. It has a soft, cushiony feel to it. It's very comfortable to the head, but when there's impact, there's a stiffening that occurs, a subtle stiffening as well. Doesn't affect ball control, doesn't affect the speed of ball coming from your head. All you have to use is proper heading technique. But of course, that's just heading. And then you talk about all the other issues. Imagine, by the way, if you run into a head-to-head moment and you're wearing Unequal and the next person isn't, guess what? You just protected that person by definition of having this on your head.
You both get the benefit, yeah.
Yeah, it really is interesting. And of course, think about corner kick and set piece header drills. Now, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, we're starting to actually practice those types of things.
Yeah, they're starting around 12, and then by 14, they're actually able to use it in games and practices on a more consistent basis. But we're limiting, by the way, for parents who are watching this and coaches who haven't seen this yet, if you're in the younger age groups, there's no heading allowed at all anymore. I mean, we don't even introduce that until they get to about age 12. And we'll put the specifics out on our website for you so you can see what age can do what. But you're right, Jim. So you get to that age, say, U12, you're starting to get into it a little bit. You get to U14, now you're doing it on a regular basis.
Well, and coaches will tell you in practice, you've got a 15 or 16-year-old, for instance, even a 13, 14-year-old. Here comes this ball. I got to practice directing it into the goal. It's coming from the corner, or it's coming from over there on a set piece, and I've got to direct it. Right. Well, what am I going to do that 15 times and half the time get it wrong and hurt my head? Right. Well, we suggest at least for that set of heading drills, when you want to get the repetitions in, you want to actually be able to learn the skill without kind of, hey, coach, my head hurts. Yeah. Well, this allows you to do more reps, get better at what you're doing, develop your confidence more so that when you're in the game, you actually know what you're doing. You feel better about being able to handle and control that ball because I practiced this enough times to know what I'm doing. So, it has an incredibly utilitarian aspect to it from that standpoint. But then just kind of as a just in case, that's what this is all about. Look, we protect our shins, Dave. Come on now.
That's true.
Man, let's protect those bones down there. Because there's very important shins. But what about the head? Brianna Scurry, again, I spoke to her. Even Ali Krieger said, we focus so much on the shins. What the heck is with the head that we haven't made mandatory protection for the head? So it's like that. It's an interesting dynamic, working your way in and changing the culture, just like skiing or snowboarding. 10 years ago, how often did you see a helmet on the slopes? Not very much. Now, you're an idiot if you don't have protection.
Yeah, right. From a training perspective, from a coach's perspective now, one of the things that we're taught when we're teaching heading technique is to use the hairline. Now, I have a bit of a problem with that teaching technique here. It's pretty obvious, right? But what I noticed is I had some kids that were still during coaching drills and stuff. They're trying to hit with the top of their head, or they think that the way to hit this ball is to take it with the top of the head, and the top of the head is not a particularly strong part of the head. So, right. If you're trying to coach the hairline, what I found with my kids is if you have this thing on, it makes it easier to teach the kids. You're going to hit this. You're not going to hit anything up here. You're not going to hit. You're going to try to get the ball squarely where that happens to fall, which is right about at the perfect heading spot there at the hairline. So as a teaching aid, I still have a player on my U14 team right now. She's a wonderful player. She's strong in every way. She's just not comfortable doing the heading technique yet. And one of the reasons for that is because she's got bad technique and she keeps hitting it on the top of her head, and that doesn't feel good. No. So teaching the kids to hit the ball properly, to lock in, to pull up the arms and do that is I use this as a teaching aid now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's so you can come up with quite a few rationales for the need for this kind of head protection. But in the end, if you can protect the player, if they can learn their sport at a higher level, if they have more confidence, they enjoy the sport more, the coaches notice and give them a high five. Hey, great job out there. Of course, they're going to do that to all the kids along the way. But, let's face it, you want to do the sport you love at the highest level you can. And part of that is confidence. In sports, confidence is a big thing. So if you can develop confidence because you know your skills, you know how to play the game. And now and then, if you fall, hey, I'm okay. I feel better. I have less risk. I'm going to be playing at the level at which I'm supposed to play this game. People say, well, you're weaponizing the kids. No, you're not. You're just protecting them so that they can play the sport at the correct level.
Right. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground here today, Jim. Let's talk a little bit about us. Okay. So as a club, we've started discussions with you. I don't think we have anything completely nailed down yet in terms of what the actual how we're going to offer this for sale or anything like that to our parents. You and I are in discussions about that right now, and what I can tell everybody who's watching is at some point in the very near future, we're going to make it easy for parents and coaches to get a hold of one of these devices if you're interested in picking up one of these for your kids.
Yep.
And we'll try to work something out to make it beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, some kind of an email that kind of puts everything in one place, maybe some kind of an explanation page with some data, things like that. And then I think we can offer some kind of a discount to your club because, let's provide the incentive these days. Anywhere you can save, it's worth it. And so we'll just set up something that makes it easy and folks can look. And an educated consumer is our most important customer. And the bottom line, if you know enough, if you've learned, you've done your due diligence, that's really what it's all about. And I know Dave will help us get the information to you on a timely basis over the next few weeks.
So I want to wrap up with a question that's one of my favorites. Jim, you know a lot more about this than I do. If I knew all the things that you knew, what questions should I ask as a parent? What kinds of things should I be looking for if I'm evaluating these different types of technologies and stuff on the market?
Well, part of it is it can be the practical side of things. How does it feel? How does it look? When I do head the ball, do I have ball control? Does it go where I want it to go, or does it in fact go in a different direction? What is the weight? This Halo 3, by the way, weighs 2.5 ounces. This is very lightweight. The one you're wearing weighs 4.5 ounces. So a little heavier, but more protection as well.
I'm a little bigger too.
Yeah, bigger, exactly. So I think a parent needs to just do a little bit of a comparative, understands what's out there, check out pricing, of course, and in the end, get something. Get your child protected. And of course, we would suggest it be unequal, but in the end, just get something on your child that they're comfortable wearing, that they like wearing, and that they'll wear in games and in practice so that they can be protected out of the pitch.
Absolutely. Jim, thank you so much for your time this morning. I think this has been very educational for me, and I'm hoping it's educational for our coaches and our parents. It's a pleasure to meet you face to face on the Skype.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to more conversations together in the future.
Thanks, David. Appreciate the time. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.